Hello and welcome to all my combo lords. Thank you for joining me here this morning or afternoon or wherever you're at. And today I needed to do or wanted to do a little video that I decided to do in the live format in case anyone also has any questions or thoughts they want answered. And the reason I wanted to make a video today is because I'm in the final stages of editing together my video presentation of me dropping the grade -1 final exam. That means sort of my strange version of a test for this arc of the past year or so, although this channel's actually younger than that. Here on Combo Class, mostly reflecting the topics and subject matter that I've put on the main Combo Class channel, which is where that episode will be dropping. But all of the topics are things that I've enjoyed ranting about on here as well. It's going to involve a mathematical section and then some other stranger sections. And before I jump right into explaining all that, let me note that I did mention it was probably going to drop today. I'm not positive if I'll have it finished because the episode has a bunch of different locations and I need to cut text on a bunch of the shots. So to make sure I get it maximally good as an episode, it may end up coming out tomorrow. But because of that, in this video, I'm going to not only share a little prequel to the sort of mood and ideas behind it, but I also will give a few sample questions in case anybody wants to get started on their own on it. This type of test is not going to give you a score. There will be a way you can score if you want, where I will number each question or prompt that should be worth 1 point, and then you could tally up how many you can do if you want, but that's not the important part of it. The goal, if you want the goal to be to strive for getting every single one right, then awesome. But I don't think many people will be in that boat. The goal should be to read through and or watch through the questions or prompts and see how many of them you think you might be able to tackle if you sat down and spent a few minutes on. And it's not only going to maybe help your brain grow a little bit, challenge some of your problem solving and make sure that you would know how to use some of the tools that I've shared with you that you've seen me using, but also to, since it's optional, maybe test your sort of ability to motivate or encourage yourself or to dedicate time towards something that might feel a little like work for parts of it. The mathematical section may take a tiny bit of arithmetic and things like that, but if you can dedicate time to things that you think are good for your brain, that's a good skill of its own. And that's one thing that we can maybe try and have this test go for, personal perseverance, because it's optional and because you can pass Combo Class grade -1 without getting all the questions right. You can be considered to pass if you've just seen a lot of my content and want to follow me along for the ride and at least take a look at the test. But I think that some of you may look through and find some of the questions or prompts that you think, well, if I sat down for 3 minutes with my computer or a pen and paper, I might be able to figure this out. And I think it'll be a good little journey. Sort of encodes some fun facts as well. Some of them may be a little more random of questions just to test whether you know how to use a certain concept, but others may be sort of a fun fact hidden in the form of a question. And there's not just a mathematical section either. For people who don't want to do any math, a lot of my viewers are here for that, and since that became such a big focus of this grade, it is the largest section of the test by far. It is about 20 or 30 questions that are math related that require a little problem solving and or arithmetic mixed with probably needing to know some concept from math that I've shared on the main channel, but that also is a known thing in math. So theoretically, somebody could pass this entire test without having seen any of my episodes if somehow they happened to have studied all the types of weird number theory I covered. And it would take a lot more work in that case, but it would still be good for the brain. And there's even going to be 3 sections on this test: a longer mathematical one that's a little more opinion based, such as essay like questions of your thoughts on things, and then a third section that's even more abstract and different than what I've ever seen on a test before. And that you'll have to just wait and see in the episode. So even if you don't want to see any of the math stuff, you'll still enjoy the episode. The episode not only has a lot of locations throughout my yard and nearby places, but it also has cameos from the cats, and there's some fire, and there's a few, 2 different squirrel cameos as well. So it's a fun episode regardless, and also just has some of my thoughts about the philosophy of a lot of problems of tests, because I'm not approaching making this test as someone who loves tests. I'm approaching this from a standpoint of, well, sometimes to win you gotta beat them at their own game. And so if I think tests could be improved in our society, maybe the only way to go about that is by making one. And that's why it's a little different from a test. Not only that it will become increasingly abstract throughout it and have some sectors that are definitely different, but also just from the motivation of the test, aiming to avoid any mandatory nature. It's all about self-motivation to want to do this. Avoid any score affecting your future. The score is just something you can choose to award yourself or not. And to avoid it being too memorization based. Because although there are topics here that you may need to have seen a main channel episode to fully have the clue of how to tackle, you could theoretically do it all on your own. I will leave a little vocabulary list at the beginning of the test that will clarify things like any nicknames I might use that aren't a typical mathematical term, such as Threeven and Hyper11, will have their definitions clarified at the beginning so that I can use those in the questions. And due to those reasons, I hope that some of you will like this test, maybe even especially those of you who don't normally like tests, because if you already like tests, maybe you've already found some good things to get out of them. And if you already think you hate tests, then maybe you will find 1 or 2 things that are possible to appreciate about a hypothetical test. We're also going to go into a brief, I guess you could say, roast of a few popular tests. Very briefly at the beginning go into how things like IQ tests, as well as personality tests, are not necessarily a gauge of a full-scale intelligence or capability. And we'll also, go into some thoughts about how I personally don't like tests very much. In fact, the episode I'll be putting out on the main channel might be called something along the lines of, I hate tests, so I created one. Like, I did good on tests in school. It's hard to say this without sounding like it's bragging, but it's not something I would care to brag about. It's not something I'm particularly proud of or not, but I was very good at getting an A on a test in school. It helped me kind of actually slack off in school and not have to try as hard and still get A's in most classes. So maybe that wasn't great for my education, that tests were such a big percent of the grade, because I was good at doing those and then could skip other classes and stuff and still get an A. But a lot of students around me too hated tests because they hadn't studied or read as much as me, or because their brain wasn't wired for that type of problem solving or that type of way that things were phrased by the school a lot. And so it's not really fair that I got a way easier chance of getting a good grade in classes because I was good at the skill of test taking, which is a skill of its own, the skill of test taking. Knowing what they're asking for, knowing how to eliminate things that couldn't be the right response. Things like knowing if you only half know the answer, how to fake it enough to get half credit. There's all sorts of skills to test taking. When you have multiple choice tests, those are kind of the worst because they're almost guaranteed to be memorization based, sort of. Either you just know it right off the bat, or you just have to use brute force a very small amount of times to eliminate a few of them. But on multiple choice ones, if you're good at taking tests, you can almost instantly eliminate one of them as like a definitely not it, eliminate another one as like a too vague or off topic to be it, and then you're practically left with 2, maybe 3 of the 4 to consider. And so tests aren't great in the way they're implemented in schools, in my opinion. A test that is more along the lines of asking for written responses, I think, has more of a chance maybe to provoke unique thought as opposed to memorization. But there's still a lot of problems with the way the system works. So if you had asked me when I first started making this grade if I was going to make a test, I would have said, oh, probably not. But after enough thought, due to wanting to show a few things that could potentially be good about tests, and just to force some of you to try and engage with a little problem solving like you see me do a lot, I think that will be useful, and I almost feel obligated to do it as somebody who not only likes making my videos creative, but also does like that my videos can teach the world. Part of teaching might be forcing or encouraging viewers to try things on their own. So that's why there will be a long mathematical problem solving section, you got to write down a few opinions about a few things section, and a more abstract section at the end, more real world section, which you'll have to see in that episode. Now, those are some preliminary thoughts of what's going into this test, and what I'll start with now is giving an example of 1 or 2 questions that could be on the mathematical section of it that aren't on the test, so that I can actually solve through them with you right here. I'll design a question in my head that's similar-ish to what would be on the test but isn't on it. So the first part of the test is about clocks. So let's say an alternate, bonus question that could have been on the test in an alternate reality but wasn't is, let's say you have a 12-hour clock and it's starting at 5 o'clock and you have an alarm that's going to ring every every 8 hours. Then which times will it and won't it end up ringing at? Now, that's a slightly simpler one than some of the ones I ended up putting on there, but a few of them might be that level. And that's an example of one that you could theoretically brute force by going about 12 times on the clock. And in fact, you'd actually only need to go 6 times on the clock before you noticed you were back where you had started. So you could theoretically brute force out 6 steps. You also could take shortcuts, such as noting that, well, first of all, if I'm going forward 8 hours on a 12-hour clock, that's the same as going backwards 4. Forward 8 is backwards 4. And it's almost easier to envision in your head or draw on paper or something, I'm hopping backward 4. Now, if I imagine I'm hopping backward 4 from a time, and there's 12 total, you can imagine that each 4 is a third of the total time. 4, 8, 12, 4, 8, 12. And so we'll note that regardless of the starting time, we're only going to be hitting 3 times if we're going forward 8 hours. Because we have gone 4, 8, 12, 4, 8, 12, or could be considered the other way, 8, 4, 12. And because of that, we know that there's only going to be 3 times it does hit, 9 times it doesn't, and we can sort of hop them out from where the 5 might draw a triangle. And that one requires a mild amount of brute force, and there are a few like that where theoretically you could go at it with brute force. And by brute force, I mean sort of the technique where you just try thing after thing until you've gotten to your conclusion. And sometimes that could work. For example, on an analogy about a clock, there might only be up to 12 or 24 possible things you might need to check in some modular things on a clock. But other times it won't be as useful. And as an example of that, of how if you see something that you're not sure if you should use brute force to tackle on the exam, I'm going to recommend you probably don't need to. There's probably a shortcut if you're on the fence of whether the brute force would take too long or not. And there's probably a shortcut. Because with one of the questions, I remember it's about rolling dice, and it's about a pattern that you could already know about what dice would do typically. But as an example, I said, if you rolled the dice 1 billion times, then, or maybe it was 1 million, I forgot, 1 million or 1 billion times, then what would you expect in this certain scenario? And of course, what you want to do is figure out what the dice would do on any scale, on some sort of either average, or in the case of this question, it was a bit more of a frequency, whichever one hit at the highest single frequency. And I just laughed with my camera guy for a minute when we were imagining somebody being like, okay, I gotta roll these dice 1 million times. Okay, time to start tallying. Maybe I'll quit after 1,000 rolls and just multiply that result by 1,000 to save time. So no need to try and brute force them if you're not sure. They're gonna have shortcuts probably. Now, let's think of another example of a few types of things that could be on there. Sometimes I ask for, in a given range, a few questions tackle this sort of thing, giving you either a range based on this amount of digits, which you can assume would be in base 10 when we write the number in less specified, although if you do specify that you're actually looking at a different base for a moment. So sometimes it's a digit range in a given base, or sometimes it's between this number and this number, you might see. But sometimes you'll have to find how many of a given type of number exist at a given size. And so let's say that I was asked how many 2-digit numbers in base 10, well, actually, let's say a little different to add a slight layer, because some have a few layers. Let's say I was asked how many 2-digit numbers in base 8 would have certain traits. And let's say I asked how many would be square numbers. Well, I could write down all of the 2-digit numbers in base 8 and check them. That's obviously going to be a finite list, but going to take longer than we need to do. What you could do is find the minimum and the maximum and see what those square numbers are. And by comparing the roots, or the numbers we squared to get them, we'll know how many square numbers there were in a range. For example, if I was looking at how many square numbers are between 99 and 999, then since I'm going from 99 is right under 10 squared, then we're going from including the 10th square number up through including whatever the square root of 999's, integer right under would be, which I think is 31. And in this case, we would be saying, well, 2-digit numbers in base 8 are going to start from the number that looks like 1, 0, and going to go up to the number that looks like 7, 7, because that's the highest digit in that base. And so then we'd think, what is the 7, 7? We could even shortcut that by knowing it's going to be 1 less than the 1, 0, 0 in that base. So our highest 2-digit number in the base would be right under 100 in that base, which would mean 8 squared, because our bases have our, ones place is the 0th power of the base number, our base numbers place, and then our base numbers squareds place, and etc. So we'd be saying up till right under 64, but not including it, would be the largest square number we'd want to include, and that's 8 squared. So the largest we would want to include, assuming it's in the range we're about to find the lower end of, is 7 squared. And then we look at what's at the lower end. What does 1, 0 mean there? That meant 8, and so we want ones higher than that. So we are including 9. So we're including from 3 squared through 7 squared. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 5 square numbers in that range. So we would have 5 square numbers that are 2 digits in base 8. There's also other ways you could, deduce things like that. you could, for example, find a way of calculating all of the square numbers up to 8 squared, and then finding how many to subtract out that were lower than 2 digits in that base would be another way to do it. Like, I'm going up to possibly only including up to 7 squared, and I wouldn't include 1 or 2 squared because those wouldn't be 2 digits in that base. That also leaves us the 5. Now, of course, unless told otherwise, assume everything's base 10. We need a standard, and we're stuck in base 10, unfortunately. If you'd like, you can write your answers in whatever base you want, but I'm assuming you will write your answers in base 10, unless the question says, write this in another base. So, that's an example of a base type 1. There are some questions on there that relate to bases. There are some that are, for example, here is a number in terms of an amount of a thing. How would we write that in a few bases? There's also the other way around, where you could see here is a string of digits. What would this string of digits refer to as a number if these bases had written it each? So remember, you can go two ways with your looking at the base. You can say, here's an amount, what symbol would the base write it in? Or here's a symbol, what amount would the base write it in? Which gets confusing when you don't use proper lingo because we associate them with being the same. We associate 1, 2, 3 with being 123. But really we got to remember that it's different to say 123 of a thing, meaning that many of a pile of rocks, or to say whatever 1, 2, 3 means in a given language. So, now I'm going to go through some comments because that was a long intro and 1 or 2 examples. Let's chat with the comments for a moment, and then I will give a few more examples. And 1 moment. And yep, someone will be the 100,000th subscriber here very soon. It is the subscribers are going up fast enough that in one of my recent streams here, I had first predicted that it was going to pass that amount of subscribers at around this Saturday, or possibly when the weekend started, like after Friday. But I think it'll be sooner than that. I think that we're going to be hitting 100,000 sometime in the middle of next week. So this week's going to be pretty wild. And in fact, after I chat with the comments, I will give a few notes about this week. My camera's doing weird light though. This is like a camera that sometimes functions better than the normal webcam camera, but sometimes it makes things that are kind of dark really red. So, thank you all for joining me. And grade -1 is not made for a specific age. I think that it could be good for any age to observe, because I think it's good for people to observe things even if it's above your level of understanding, or maybe even if it's below your level of understanding, to see different ways of phrasing things. And so let's see, there's no specific age range. A lot of the grade -1 fans range from like 15 to 35. It's a pretty wide age range, but there's not really an intended margin. The more people who can understand from it, the better. Now, when is the exam coming out? It's not coming out right now. Technically, there's a prequel to some of it because it's going to take me another day to probably finish editing. It will be out possibly tonight, if not tonight, right after tomorrow's stream. Tomorrow I'll be doing another stream at basically starting in a little after what time it is right now. Right now it's 9:45 in my time, 10 a.m. my time. Tomorrow I have a scheduled stream also, which I'm doing each Monday this month. And so the final exam will probably be coming out right after that. There's a chance it'll be coming out tonight. And that, remember that will be on the channel just called Combo Class, where my full best episodes go. This started as sort of my bonus channel, even though it has evolved to being the one that is going to pass 100,000 first, wildly. And in fact, we are really close to 99. Let's see. It is getting preposterously close. We are at 98.9. So it's going to happen this week. I will film or probably live stream something when that happens, but I don't know when it's going to be. It's just whenever it happens, I'll film or live stream something. There will also be my scheduled streams and other stuff. However, over this month, some of the streams may be a little more mysterious. There may be a few at certain points where I only have my voice and my computer screen, or where I'm in some like super dark room that is hard to see me or something, because there is going to be some secrets that I need to reveal over the course of dropping the finale episode, which will be coming out after the final exam later in the month, as well as the grade -2 intro, which will be coming in early April, possibly right at the beginning of April, or if not, shortly after. And those will all be pretty wild. The final exam is 16 minutes or so, but the finale is going to be pretty long. There's a lot of stuff I want to put into that, and I'm going to be filming that the next couple weeks, which I started yesterday. And I did put the scene I filmed, which will probably be the intro to that long finale, on Patreon for people who are supporting there. And those people will also get their names thanked on a whiteboard in that finale, which I'll be filming in like a week, that part of it. But it's going to be a wild couple weeks because I'm doing a crazy transition in the classroom to partially reset the mess and partially add new surprises. And it's also going to be raining and flooding a lot here. Not like the type of flood where you need to evacuate right where I live, but like your whole yard is a puddle type flood. So the combo classroom might be a puddle, but it also might need to be in somewhat of a state of secrecy. So this final exam episode will also be one of the last times you see the combo classroom until the finale episode itself. Although we will still be doing all our content, might just need to be in the room more and or a little more secretive. And lot of chatting stuff here, and no need to argue in the comments, but thank you to all the people leaving the nice thoughts. And don't really have time to reply to all of them. One that I'll mention, somebody asked about a favorite branch of mathematics. I couldn't really say I have a particular favorite, but on this exam that I'm putting together, it's definitely most focused on what you'd call number theory, certain properties that different whole numbers have, and certain ways that certain whole numbers are solutions to certain equations or aren't, although when possible I phrase it more like a nickname than like the equation, because sometimes you can get a technical enough nickname to not need to write everything as an equation. So let's see. Well, let's go to one or two other thoughts about that I mentioned we might go through in this stream. And apart from getting to 100,000 this week, which I will do something cool for, and the other wildness, another thing, there we go, that I might mention is that it's almost the one called Pi Day that people talk about. Now, they call it that because it's March 14th coming up in 2 days, and that is 314 in some ways of writing the months. I know there are other ways where you write the other part first. I can definitely see the logic to that. I'm not advocating for the fact that the month says 314, but that's how people settled on it. Now, there is a trend for YouTubers who make math content to do something for Pi Day. A lot of channels do something like that. I probably won't have a huge video planned because I'm in the middle of a bunch of other stuff, but I will do some sort of little short or bonus video related to that. Or there's a chance that that will be the day we pass 100,000, and then my live stream will be about both of those things. So, we'll see, but there will be some form of content I'll put out then, but it's not going to be one of my most long planned videos or anything, because we're working on other things at the moment. And as someone mentioned, yes, 31415 was even more pi-like, that's true. So, that was an extra extended version of it. But, you know, you could say the truest Pi Day in a while was 314 in the year 1519. Because, you know, it would then go 3.1415. Wait, no, 1592. Okay, no, 1592. Yeah, 1592. Okay, depending on if you round or not, if you go with the chunk of digits or if you round it in the year, either 1592 or 1593, if you're rounding, then Pi Day was extra long of a string. So, let's note a few other things on the test, and what I'm actually going to transition to is a few things on the final exam that are actual questions on it. So these ones I will no longer be giving the answers to right here. I'm just going to use one or two as an example of a few prequel questions that will be on there for anybody who wants to either see an example of the types or to get a head start on any of it. Although, as a reminder, it's not only is it optional, although recommended, but there's no deadline. So the answers will be put out a week after the test on this channel. I'll put out the answers. But some of the things are open-ended, so only some of them are going to have answers. Others are more open-ended. The math section will have answers, basically. And that's one of my only videos that I will recommend not clicking unless you really want to. You know, of course, as a content creator, it's a lot better for me to advocate that you click all my videos. But for the sake of your brain, I'm going to recommend on that video, when it's called something about the answers, to skip it if you're still working on the test, or if you think that at some point you'd try out the test. If you think that at any point in the next year or so you might try the test, or that you haven't seen all the episodes on the main channel, so you don't understand some of the topics on the test, but that you think you might watch the episodes on the main channel someday, then I would recommend waiting, because these questions will each have some aspect of problem solving or arithmetic or something you have to do, not just memorization. And so if at some point you might do that, good to save that and have it good for your brain without the spoilers of the answers. So, looking at a few questions that will actually be on this exam. One example of a type of thing that you will need to know what a concept means, but you will also have to do a little logic and calculation, is an example here of one of the simpler questions, which is, what is the smallest number with the prime signature 2, 1, 1, 1? I will write that in the chat. I will write down sample questions. So the smallest number, and prime signatures are a term that refer to whole numbers, so you're not going to be looking for fractional stuff there, is an example. And for these ones, don't leave the answers in the chat here. I want people to be able to try them themselves. If you have the answer to any of these, write it down on your own for when the whole test drops. But don't answer these as I'm going here, because I want to be leaving them as clues for other people to be able to think through on their own, so all of us can train our brains. Now, and if it was about answering square root pi, that's totally fine. Describing other stuff like that. Just, you can answer anything except the questions I put here. And in that, you will need to, know what a prime signature means. And in that, I might even make sure that's on the list of clarifying terms that's at the beginning. Although, it still might be something you may have need to encounter either in number theory or in one of my videos on the combo class channel. Not this one. The main combo class channel is where all of this knowledge definitely has been mentioned at least once. And from there, you'd be able to solve this one relatively easy. And another example of one that is sort of like a little bit of arithmetic, although you could probably even do it in your head. All of the ones that require arithmetic, try not to use a calculator unless you need, because they might require like a little bit of taking a note on pen and paper or something, but they probably won't require any calculators. But of course, if a calculator will help you solve it and still help you think, and you just need it for a moment, feel free. So, one example here of one that requires you to need to know a mathematical term as well, although maybe a little more common of a term than prime signatures, because prime signatures are underrated, although somebody who studies number theory would know them. But here's an example of one. Is what is 3, and I'm writing a double upward arrow for what's called tetration. What is 3 tetrated to 2 minus 2 tetrated to 3? Where this symbol refers to tetration. So, this is basically a simple arithmetic thing that you could do in your head if you know how to apply tetration. And that's probably one of the ones more of you might know how to do if you remember how to do it right, because that's the most popular episode on the main channel. Now, another example of one that you aren't going to want to try and brute force by testing out a lot of possibilities. You're going to want to use a pattern you may have heard in one of my episodes, or try and figure out this pattern yourself, which is, what is a 9-digit in base 10 number whose 4th power is palindromic? Now, some of these, if you want to try and study for the test or whatever, are somewhat clear what episode on the main channel would have this in it. There are 34 episodes on the main channel before this one, and for the section I'm discussing now, and really all the ones that require a type of knowledge, it's basically the math episodes that have come out of those. And a lot of them give you a clue in the name for certain topics that may show up, may include these things, 3-even numbers, palindromic numbers, tetration, hyper 11s, and different bases, and more. So there will be more, but these are examples of ones that there is not only an episode about some of these things, but an episode with a clue in the title or thumbnail as to which one it's about. This is an open video, like how you could have an open book test, meaning that if you see a question that you want to answer, but you think you don't know or remember the episode where that concept showed up, and you don't already know the concept from somewhere else, you can rewatch whatever videos. It won't be like ruining it for yourself because it's not a memorization based test. Even if you rewatch a video that has the name of what's in the question, you're still going to need to do some problem solving or logic of how to apply a certain thing. So totally fine to look up the videos. That would be my first resort before I would try and pull out a calculator or a Google search or anything. Now, someone said grade -2 final. Oh, grade -2 itself, yeah, will be bussin', as the slang goes here. If there are samples of final, if these are samples of final exam questions from grade -1. And, yep, grade -pi, as you mentioned there, probably will not be its own grade. However, we could clarify the moment when grade -pi occurs. You know, that point will happen during one of the episodes in grade -3. So, first, grade -2, which will be very wild. Some of my favorite topics I didn't put in grade -1. I know a lot of them won't even fit in grade -2. There'll probably be 36 more episodes on the main channel over the next year-ish, as well as all of the stuff on this channel. And there might be more episodes next grade, we'll see. And I have more ideas than that amount that will fit. But some of the ideas that I definitely need to put in are ones that I planned for grade -1, so I already have them pretty brainstormed. But I ended up moving them due to wanting to film some cool shot for them that I couldn't pull off yet, or needing to do more research first to double check something, or things like that. A few of the best topics got pushed off for later and will be coming. And what do I think about the Mandelbrot set? I love it. It's great. Fractals are awesome, and that is a classic one. Very simple definition or simple equation or set of rules to create quite elaborate thing. So definitely we'll have an episode about the Mandelbrot set someday. Now, let's do a few more. We're going to do 5 sample math questions given here. There's somewhere between 20 and 30 math questions that will end up being on it. Some have a few little parts, so for example, some that have a few parts are, you might be given a number you have to write in a few different bases or something like that. And if you do want to grade yourself, you can consider those as just being equal fractions based on how many there are. If a question has 3 parts, those are each worth 1/3 of a point if you only get some of them. But your choice if you have fun scoring it, if you find that motivational. It's really just about trying it and giving it a genuine, attempt. So I am going to go on to 1 or 2 more questions from the test. Sorry I can't answer everyone's chat comments, but I do appreciate them. And I will maybe have more time to get to them in a little bit. This won't be a super long stream, but I guess it's already been almost an hour, so it will probably end up being a little bit longer at least. So here's an example of one that you could figure out if you looked at the episodes which one this has the clue in it if you really use logic. But you'd kind of need to use problem solving even to figure out which episode was referring to this if you hadn't seen it, but you could also try and figure this out on your own. So this is an example of one that if you've seen an episode, then you'll probably know a formula to whip together. And if you haven't, you still could have a good shot on it, but it would be a bit more challenging. And that one is, what is the only multi-set of 24 positive integers where if you added them all together, the result is equal to if you multiplied them all together? So, and these should have commas after them. I mean, question marks after them, obviously. I keep forgetting my question marks. But, yeah. What is the only multi-set? Meaning, basically, a lot of people would just refer to this as a set, at least casually, a collection of positive integers that you might, stick inside parentheses with commas between them, or however you want to write the collection of them. Multi-set really just means that you are allowed to have terms that are duplicates of each other. So, some people would, when using the word set, if they're being extra, could say nitpicky, or sometimes it's useful to do it, sometimes being extra clear, they might save the word set for ones where it's a collection just of the things. But if we were talking about positive integers, for example, we couldn't be like, oh, there are 3 2s in there. Here with a multi-set, we could do that. So, that's an example of that. And here is an example of one that is something that, for those who really like math, you would probably have known this before you ever watched any of my videos already. So, this does not require my videos necessarily, but you could answer it from my videos easily as well. And this one has a more subjective answer. There are many possible answers. It is to describe, not describe. Describe at least 5 unproven questions or conjectures in math. So, and these are phrased a little clearer in the actual test. This is me just typing them right now, but they'll be extra clear what I'm asking for on the test. But this one is subjective anyway. You want basically unproven conjectures. The way it's actually phrased there is probably something more like open questions or unproved conjectures. And essentially, that's just something that I have mentioned in my videos because I like open questions. So on the main channel and on this channel, each of the channels have had more than 5 open questions mentioned. But you also could mention any one that you know how to describe. You don't need to obviously describe like all the progress that's been done toward it. You can just say what the question is, essentially. So you can say, for example, instead of just saying the blank conjecture, try to give each one like a sentence or so saying something about what it's asking or what it's wondering or guessing. And that, or real quick to answer the question about these, somebody about the 24 integer multi-set question was curious if they had the right ones but multiplied or added them in the wrong order. That wouldn't change things because addition and multiplication within positive integers, order does not matter. We can say 1 times 2 is the same as 2 times 1. Also 1 plus 2 is the same as 2 plus 1. So when writing this multi-set, the order does not matter. Obviously, if we could rearrange them, there's going to be more than one answer. So you can just pick a direction to write them, like ascending or descending order. But it's really just about what are the 24 numbers. And they can include duplicates that would have this property. In any order, shouldn't matter. So someone mentions they're scared of the big brain math. There are a few questions that are a little easier than these. And there's also, like I said, other sections. So there's sections that are more opinion based, where I will give you one example of one of those as well. An example of a more opinion-based one is for this second section after the math section. It's something that is even subjective of how to grade. I don't give a word limit or something. I say that write at least a few sentences about each of these that you consider at least one solid paragraph. And one of the opinion ones, for example, is what are some pros and some cons of how we keep track of time on clocks and or calendars? And so there's a whole section of a few like that, because that's a big part of combo class. When I was going through the episodes, I didn't just want to be like, do you know how to apply mathematical tools? There were a lot of times in episodes where there was something about, here's some structure we could analyze possible improvements on, things we take for granted about society, actually deconstructing them. And so I want you to add some thoughts that if you need, you can, repeat whatever thoughts you heard me say if you agree with them, or you can add whatever you think about it. And thank you too to whoever thanked me for the stream. Thank you for joining. And there's also a third section that I'm not going to mention right now. You're going to have to wait till the episode to see that. But the third section is even more abstract than an opinion section. It is sort of a real-world-y section. And part of the reason for the increasing abstraction is because there are other topics I like apart from math, and there were other things included in this grade. There was things about nature, for example. There are things about language. There was things a little bit about philosophy. And those things were harder to make a non-memorization based question about that had one correct answer. Like, it was harder to make a question about something we'd learned in a snack break about botany without it just being you repeating a word you heard me say. Or without going fully the other direction and finding a more abstract way to incorporate nature into the test, which I have done. So the third section will be something for the fans of the general combo class vibe, or possible philosophies or attitudes, even if you don't care about the math section or the opinion section. And the exam won't be like an online poll. I'll probably make somewhere on the Discord, dedicate some thread, or just tell people to post it in somewhere on there if they want, because it's easier to add spoilers there sometimes. If people want to comment answers to it on the video, when I post the combo class video on the main channel, there is a way to do that and to be respectful of people not seeing it, which is, if you want to post answers on the combo class video, please do it like this, which is, you're going to be like, spoilers. And then you skip a bunch of lines. Or put a dot or something on a bunch of lines, so that people need to click read more, or something like that, like read more or something to see the answers. So that's something that would be cool if people want to do that. Not sure if just everyone's going to be spamming the answers. If only a few people are, then I'll probably remove the answers that don't have this spoiler thing. So if you definitely want your comment to stick with this format. And really, it's sort of more of a personal exercise. There's going to be something like a Google document. I'll make some sort of text version of it. That'll be in the description of the video when it drops, so that since I go through it really quick in the video's like, here's a question, here's a question, here's a question. You could theoretically do the exam by pausing the video and rewatching bits of the video, but if you're actually doing the exam, you're probably going to watch the video and then get to the text document. And the text document you could print, could be cool. If you have a printer available, printing it and then writing your answers on there is a good option. If not, you can copy paste it into another document on your computer, write some notes on there. You may need to do some simple arithmetic on some of them that I recommend not using a calculator if you can. So there's a chance some of them you'll need to like take some notes or something before you just straight up write down an answer. But they're probably at the level where, like, if you were stuck on a desert island and needed to, you could do them just in your brain if you knew the right clue going into them. And if you hit the problem solving just right. Everyone's different at problem solving different things. This is what I designed, so there's no way to make it unbiased fully. So there's going to be some types of intelligence that some people have that makes them not as capable at understanding or answering all this. Other people might have an easier time answering all this. And so remember, it's not a gauge of intelligence. It's more of an activity that's good for the brain to do. And it could be a gauge of what things you did fully understand and know how to apply yourself and what things you didn't. So a gauge for what things that, you know, if you thought you knew what a word meant, but you don't know how to answer the question with that word in it, maybe you like semi-knew the tool. So, and let's see. Yep, lots of cool comments all through here. These are probably most of what I'm going to put as the sample questions for the exam. Maybe I'll put one last sample question, and let's see which one that's going to be. Our last sample question does require you to know a term. Here's kind of how I made it work, where there are some terms that I did give a definition of at the beginning of the test and or in the question. So for example, when I ask for an aliquot sum in a question or something related to that, that's a concept that anyone who studies number theory would know. But there could be people who are really into math, who have never studied number theory, who don't know what the term aliquot sum means. So then I tell us what that means. In that case, means to add up the proper divisors of a number. I say that, but for example, I don't tell you what proper divisors are, respelled out that part as well, because that's a simple enough, worldly enough term that some of those I think people just should know, and they've shown up in enough of my episodes that I don't even know which one to recommend if you don't know the terms, because they've shown up in a ton. So for example, if I say something like a prime number, I'm not going to spell out what that means. Some basic things you'll need to know. However, if I say, you know, how many steps does an aliquot chain take, I'll clarify a little bit about what that means if it's a type of word that you'd only know if you had studied a very specific thing. I also will clarify that threeven means numbers that are a multiple of 3, and that hyper-11s are what some call generalized rep units, which are numbers composed of only the digit 1 in some base. And so, for example, there are questions that mention threeven and or hyper-11. For example, the last question I was going to put here, which is, what is the natural density of numbers that are threeven but not even. And this is an example of something that I almost wanted to put the definition in of what this means. I decided not to. If you need, you can look up natural density. You'll still need to problem solve because I doubt there's an online resource that uses both natural density and threeven in the same sentence, apart from this sentence I just typed. But you'll still need to problem solve the threeven but not even part. But natural density is an example of one I might not define because I think it's an important thing for people to know. It has shown up in one of the relatively recently released math ones. So some topics or terms like that I might not fully clarify because I might think they're foundational enough and in enough fields mentioned that they're good for people to know. And someone's wondering if I have any advice on filming a video, math or otherwise. And in particular, sounds like a math video made in a small apartment. Yeah, I can try and maybe give a few bits of advice. One moment. I do want to at some point make more videos that are somewhat of a mix between a tutorial and a philosophically helpful thing or motivational thing on certain things I've gotten good at. So at some point I will make, something between a tutorial and a philosophy thing about how I somehow accomplish certain things, like getting toward 100,000 subscribers, part of which did have me learning a lot about making videos. I already had made tons of videos and already do tons of writing, which relates to the brainstorms that I do for the episodes, but even a lot of video making, from filming to editing to being on camera, back in the day on other rare YouTube channels I used to have. So I already had some experience, but over the course of making this grade, I definitely learned a lot about how to make videos better. It is advice you will hear people say when they make videos and they've made enough that no matter how good you think your early videos are, as long as you are a little critical on them and make sure you're not just randomly churning stuff out, but you're not so critical to prevent you from making a new one that you think is even better than the last. So you're a little self-critical, but that you are going to keep making them at some rate, whether that's once a month, once a week, or whatever, then you will get better. You will find things that you just the things that used to be really hard or require a lot of thought about the process, you'll be able to do fluidly without thinking, and then you can focus your brain on advancing to other things. And it's hard to pin down all of the little things that I've learned or that I would say I recommend. One thing I like to do is make a long brainstorm written down, and not necessarily always 100% scripted, which for some types of content you might want it to be 100% scripted, but sometimes even just having something mostly brainstormed can help you have a little list and agenda of all the little things you want to include. For YouTube, I personally like the feeling that YouTube videos have where they're not 100% scripted and they don't feel super Hollywoodish sometimes. And so I think that's also part of why people like my videos or find part of my style relatable, maybe, is because I grew up watching YouTube and I like that. I didn't grow up watching Hollywood movies. I don't like those. So my taste is a little more YouTube-like. But some people with that taste do like a little bit of improvisational nature. And so to me, it's good to half brainstorm something or 3/4 brainstorm something, script out certain sentences I want to say, and plan the arc of little points I want to include, but then let myself also have a little freedom in the moment. Sometimes try and come across a thought with the camera catching me first finding that thought or first putting that into the world. And That's very abstract advice, more about planning and presentation. As far as filming, it can be useful to try and make things visual, and it's sort of a choice if you want to include your face in it, some background thing for if you're making a math video, some sort of animations or some sort of writing, some mix of these things. I personally like having both my face and then something that will have some sort of text or diagrams. This stream, for example, I just have my camera on me, but I don't know if I'll ever have a main channel episode that's that minimalistic visually, because it's good to have visual things happening to be engaging. You do have to also go relatively fast-paced in the modern era and in general with entertainment to keep people hooked. Things that can be good to have in a video as goals in it can be, is it visually engaging enough? As a topic, do I have enough of a hook within the first minute or so of the video that's going to make people intrigued to stick around? And does my video have some sort of arc where we sort of get to some cool conclusion or some philosophical thought or otherwise at the end? And does it have some sort of fluidity where it doesn't feel too abrupt or chaotic going from one moment to the next? Some people reshoot different things different amounts of times. Some of my shots are the first take. For example, if there's a big fire going in the shot, that's going to be one I just have to do in one take. Other ones, I film 15 times before I get them right, or 30 times before I get them right. Because sometimes I have a take where I say something for a minute in a row, and it takes me 20 times to do that right once in a while. So redoing stuff isn't a problem. Oh, and thank you so much to Anthony Wright for the donation. Those are super helpful and awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Super nice and helpful. And continuing a little more with some more advice on that is, I think that, well, it's hard to not make my advice be toward making a video that's similar to my videos, because I make the type of videos I would like to have seen. But I personally think that mathematics is inherently a good for the world thing to make videos about, helpful and good for humanity, but you have to be very careful to not fall into the trap of seeming like another school lecture that reminds people of a school lecture they already had to attend. Some extension, just the next step of some knowledge that they already had isn't always enough. You sometimes have to have a few steps beyond what they expect, so it's almost a new surprise, a new trait about numbers, or a new way of interpreting or using numbers that's a little unexpected, or find something unexpected about it. Because people are used to school going like dit, 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 dit. And I think there's a lot of math channels online that structure their videos like that. They're like, this video is called Vector Analysis Part 12. In this episode, we go into the second half of learning about matrices, or whatever. And so that is maybe going to be harder to find a market in, because it might be more oversaturated and remind people of things they've already done in school. So I think that a little bit of, for one, drawing from the beautiful surrealism of math and the beautiful surprises of math can be good. And maybe even trying to draw from the surprises and chaos of your own world, which I do more than usual, by filming my videos outside and making sure to keep all the takes where a squirrel runs by and letting it rain on a lot of my classroom supplies. So I enhance the chaos, which I do because I would like to see in the world more in math videos. I think it's underutilized combo to mix a sort of almost punk energy with a very thoughtful, nerdy math energy. And in general, trying to do things that fall out of the trope of what remind people of all their math teachers could be helpful. Things that people don't normally associate as being connected with math, whether it's nature or music or a visual appearance or some type of soundtrack or whatever. With that said, not all of those will apply to you or the others watching. And in general, the biggest piece of advice is to keep making content, keep trying new experiments while having some degree of consistency of what a viewer might expect, and you will improve and keep getting better. Not everyone will have the luck or success due to other reasons than luck that I managed to already, but I think that whether or not I had gotten all these subscribers, I'm proud of the content I've made, and I am more proud of the newer content I've made than the older, meaning that something is improving. So, and if somebody mentioned being maybe confused with the chat, I think the chat is running normal, but it just runs a little bit late, or that I might be there's like a mini delay between me seeing the chat and me talking, but it might not be observable anyway because I don't always check the chat every second. So, other advice for filming videos and stuff real quick that I'm still working on, these are things that I'm personally going to try and upgrade in this upcoming grade, is audio can be important. I'm going to work on getting my audio a little cleaner sounding so it's easy to understand me, and so that there's less fluctuations in any volume levels. Visually, I really like filming outdoors, but it's hard to dodge sun glare, so you have to be really careful, and me and my camera people have to really work together to position shots at certain times of day so it's not washed out from the sunshine, so that it looks clear. And certain things like that are just little technical details that, although I don't want my thing to feel like a Hollywood show, that's not my goal. There are little aspects of what makes those catchy that you can incorporate, of a little bit of polishedness that can help make things digestible. So investing in a decent camera and microphone can be important. So, yep, that's some advice for now. I will make more thorough videos at some point about other tips I have for constructing videos, as well as other things I've learned over this course of making this season, and that will also be included to a degree in the long finale episode, because the finale episode will be somewhat of a mix between my process of resetting the grade with all the last things I want to include and all the shifts I want to do to make it go to grade -2, as well as a bunch of flashbacks and stories and clips and stuff about the process of making the grade, almost like a documentary, which is somewhat centered around the fact that I had to get 2 surgeries while getting this grade, and some other dark things that I have pretty much overcome. And there will also be, maybe more hints of things I've learned about filmmaking, although it's going to be a little more on the philosophical end than on the, say, tutorial end. But I do like teaching people things, so I can imagine someday making a tutorial that's like a behind the scenes of how I film and edit a video, because I've managed to make it work with a tiny budget where I just pay a friend to film with me, and then I edit it all myself. We film it in the dirt. I soundtrack it myself, at least for the recent episodes I've been doing like that. And it's a very low budget, lo-fi process, but if you get it right and spend the right time on it, you can make it work well. Of course, my biggest advice is you have to enjoy it. So, although, if you have to fake it a little bit and force it, then that's okay. It's still good to create stuff. But the people who are going to end up learning a lot about video making, getting really good at it, are going to be the people who have made hundreds of videos and the people who make hundreds of videos that you actually think through. Like, I'm not really including this stream as like that much of practice toward video making. It's practice toward public speaking maybe and other things, but practice on video making is its own thing, that as you have, hundreds of videos that you have spent time constructing, you'll get to better and better levels of expertise and creativity and stuff. And there's a certain chain of events that some people mention that is, as usual, not descriptive perfectly of exactly how life works, but is useful to consider, which is that sometimes an artist goes in phases, which is first you imitate, which is when you are seeing other art you like, and then you make something very similar to that because you saw something you like, so you do that in your art. Then you emulate, which is sort of in between the first and third stage, where you're making art that is reminiscent of your influences, but you're starting to wander in other directions and starting to have instincts and impulses to include that aren't related on something you saw that you thought was cool. And then you get to what they would call innovate, where you're doing your own weird different thing. Arguably, some of my practice came on previous YouTube channels I had, and things I filmed for Combo Class that never got released of a crazy other version I tried to make of it before. But I've still also gotten practice throughout the grade. So at the beginning, you might find yourself more copying others a bit and then trying to expand a little further. And thank you so much for enjoying the advice and for the compliments. And where do I find inspiration for my videos? If you mean like, where do I find the topics that I really like? A lot of them are just by thinking about the world and writing a lot and using writing and thinking to puzzle my way through different connections between different things or different ways of looking at things. And a lot of it also has come from reading. Reading books and articles has taught me a lot of the mathematical facts I know, and those often I will make a episode topic often after I've read about some particular little corner of math a few different places, and I want to show certain connections, or at that point I have taken notes about it a few times and re-edited them until the point where they're a different type of note than what's already showed up in a book. It's my own type of description, and at some point then I turn it to an episode. But a lot of the ones that are based on a particular mathematical fact or theorem I read about to first get in touch with those mathematical truths. So books are awesome. I've also found a lot of stuff on Wikipedia. Of course, I've had to, check their facts to make sure that deeper sources agree with them and explain them and stuff. But I've found out about a lot of cool topics on Wikipedia. So those are most of these latest ones. I guess someone also asked if I like espresso, coffee, tea, or the like. And yeah, I do drink a decent amount of caffeine these days. This is coffee right here. So I like any of those ones are good. Tea is also good. And today is my morning when I drink a decent amount of coffee. And I think that's most of the questions I'm able to answer right here. Oh, someone's saying greetings from East Bay. I am also in that general region. Assuming they mean like the Bay Area of California. I am in the Bay Area, and it is going to be really wet. It is not going to be dry. I have another camera person coming over later today, and I had to warn her, like, bring rain gear. It's going to have puddles. So, same with my main camera guy. just like left an extra pair of shoes and coat here because he knows this week it's gonna be soaked. So that's kind of funny because when I was cooking up the finale, not the final exam that's coming out tonight or tomorrow, but the finale episode that I just began filming that won't be out for like 2 weeks. And there'll be some clues of it for my Patreon people and maybe some clues here. But most of that, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks to see a super long documentary-like episode. And with that, one of the themes that I was anticipating being included was the fact that I kind of planned the grade to purposefully include certain elemental earthly things. Like, it's going to be in the dirt, and we're going to see that it takes place in the dirt. And it's going to be in the fresh air. We're going to try and hear the birds. We're going to try and occasionally capture a sunbeam and stuff like that. And that we're going to include fire. Fire is an elemental thing, and cavemen used to look at it, and I'm going to put it in my show because, for all the cavemen back there who would have wanted it on their TV show. So I realized at some point that I had included 3 of the classic 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and air. And earth, wind, fire, and water. Earth, air, fire, and water. Air could be called wind. So with those, I hadn't intentionally included water, and I'd even, in my head when I was thinking about future grades, was like, maybe a future grade will have a running theme or gag about floods. Maybe there will be some, I was envisioning a different filming location at some point that I was like, maybe there will be a few floods over the course of some future grade, but we won't put that in grade -1. Well, I forgot that I don't always have a decision about these elemental forces. These are bigger forces than me. Now, I'm a pretty big elemental force of nature, but not as big as those 4 elements. So the rain decided for me, as well as the slope of parts of my neighborhood, which is it goes downward and then flattens and so causes big puddles, decided for me that there were gonna be floods this season, and there were floods in the episodes and streams and stuff. And so I was going to mention in the finale that, alright, we decided to purposefully include 3 of the 4 elements. The 4th element decided to include itself as well. And yes, I know these aren't 4 elements as any scientific categorization of these are 4 types and everything's in one of those 4 types. But a lot of different cultures talked about those 4. They have a sort of interesting quadrality or whatever. Is that a real term? Like duality? Can I say quadrality? But now, not only did I decide, okay, well, mention in the finale that rain decided to include itself. Well, now the rain wants to be in the finale. So now I won't even need to mention it. I can just point at it. The yard's going to be flooded during parts of the finale. And you might not see all of that until the finale, because, like I said, it'll be a little bit of secrecy this month. There might even be some streams where it's just my voice and computer screen. And all of the secrecy will be worth it, because the finale will be cool, and grade -2 will be even cooler. I have some surprises that are if you know a secret and you really want to say it, but you're you gotta keep this secret. That's how I feel right now about the I can't even say. That's how I feel about certain things about the grade, that I have certain things I've planned that I'm I really want to tell them. No, I can't. I told myself that these have to be kept a secret, because even though they're exciting, they'll be more exciting just to see in action. And whoever wants to hear about imaginary numbers, that was the semi-focus of one episode on the main channel called The Clock Inside the Number 1. So I do recommend that number if you want to hear my introductory take about imaginary numbers. It's not all I have to say about them. There's a lot more we'll do about them. We haven't done like complex exponentiation or things like that. But I mean, we've hinted at it, but we haven't. We did a very particular type of imaginary numbers, the type that are on the unit circle of the complex plane. So that one's still good to get my take of what my opinions about imaginary numbers. And someone's mentioning seeing the 1 divide by 0 video and saw me live, so they came to learn something cool. Well, we're mostly just chatting for the rest of the stream, but there's a lot of learning on this channel throughout the videos and other streams, and earlier in the stream we were doing a bunch of mathy stuff. Right now we're kind of on the chatting zone, and I will note that the 1 divide by 0 is crazy. That video YouTube loves, and TikTok loved it a while ago too. It's the most viewed video on 2 different apps for Combo Class. It's the most viewed video on the Combo Class TikTok page, and even by margins more, the most viewed video on this channel. And on this channel, it has more than 9 million views, which is insane. I looked at the watch time for it, and it's been watched for like more than 10 years. Just absolutely mind-blowing. And so I want to say that probably like a good 10th or 5th, maybe even, of all my subscribers here first saw me from that. We are also getting to the point where, like, I was at a party the other night, and some friends of friends mentioned to me that they're like, I saw a video of you, and I think it was the divide by 0 one, and they didn't look it up or anything. So now random people I know are going to start commenting like, is that you dividing by 0? So thank you to Divide by 0 errors, to calculators, and to YouTube for that video's success. Who knew? So really weird, because I sometimes was thinking that it's really random which videos get a bunch of views and which ones don't. But even though there's huge fluctuations, and it seems random to me which videos get a bunch of views and which ones get a fraction of that amount, for the shorts, it's been the same videos when I put them on TikTok that were like the top ones of all, as on here. Like a huge amount of overlap on the most viewed videos on each app. So there must have been something about those videos that was extra catchy, that made more people stay on the video or comment or something. For some reason, 1 divided by 0 was that. So, what's up to the Magic Fellow? Good to see you around. Just doing a bonus little stream now to let folks know some test stuff. And to everyone wondering, I will still be doing next week's streams. Still will be on tomorrow at this time from 10 a.m. onward tomorrow. 10 a.m. my time, Pacific time. And also on Thursday in my evening. And probably when the final exam will come out, I might have it finished by tonight, but it's more likely I'll have it finished by tomorrow morning, so I'll drop it right after my morning stream. So we'll have modular Mondays and then the test release. Throughout this month, there might be a slight less amount of shorts and or bonus videos, because I am investing a lot of time into the finale. But that's why I made sure to have at least 2 live streams planned each week, plus a bunch of other random stuff I'll end up doing, like today's live video is just an extra one. And someone compared me to a math avatar, like Avatar The Last Airbender, and that is a great cartoon. I am actually a fan of cartoons. I don't watch that many shows, but I like animation, and I did watch that. Was great. So, totally down to make sure I have mastered all of the elements.
feel like I could do a little more mastering of the water and maybe the air. Gotten pretty good with the dirt and fire. So, I'm going to wrap up this stream pretty soon. Feel free to leave any more questions you might have. And either tonight or tomorrow, the full version of this test will be dropping as a video on the main combo class channel, but also linked in there. And I will put a link on the Discord and probably subreddit. Will be a text version of it of some sort, maybe a Google Doc or something like that. And even if you don't want to do the math sections, watch through the video. It's a 16-minute episode that is one of the more visually engaging ones because I filmed all over my yard and nearby areas. And also features, like I mentioned earlier, cats, squirrels, fire, whiteboards falling, all your good stuff. So made sure to make it a fun to watch test in addition to including bits that are for problem solving training and also bits that are to think about and, put into words your opinions on certain societal things that may be taken for granted. And additionally, a more abstract third section that will be the last couple minutes of that episode. So that'll be very fun. I'm not sure how many people are going to actually try it, but anyone who does want to try it should let me know afterward, and I will be proud. Proud of both of us, because I meant proud of you for doing it, but I'll also be proud that people did my test. So, it's funny, there were some people in my life who thought maybe like a year ago, oh, it probably makes sense that you would end up studying math more in school further and get some further degree in math. And I was like, no, I don't want to go back to school. I want to make a school. And what do you know? 1 year later, we're making a final exam. So, yeah, someone wrote Euler's identity there. Incredibly great. And shout out to the Combo Lord who has my back, noting why they recommended it, because it is great. Correct. And I'm going to log off pretty soon, though, because I'm going to be filming in a couple hours while dodging the rain, filming the second and third and so on scenes of the finale. And the first scene I did post on Patreon, an uncut version of it, super early. So to anyone on there, you can get that, as well as you will have your name on a whiteboard in the finale of grade -1. And if anybody else has wants their name on the whiteboard and really has either left a ton of comments over more than just the past month, and hopefully even mostly on the main channel, if you've left a lot of comments on there, or if you've ever been one of the people who's donated through one of the YouTube chat things, let me know in a comment on this video, not in the chat, in a comment on the video after the video posts when I end it. The chat takes a little while to process, and I'm not going to be able to go through the whole chat when checking that, filming that. Let me know in a comment when this video posts. I'll also let you guys know again before I film that scene, this is not the only chance, but I'll be making a whiteboard or two of thanks as an extended credits at the end of the grade -1 finale, and that'll include my Patreon supporters, anyone else who donated in any way and lets me know that they want their name, and anybody who lets me know that they want their name because they think I would recognize their name from enough comments. So, they're wondering which courses I have pursued in college and university. I'll have to go more into that in another day. But you can learn good things in school. I just personally have learned more things from books and writing and other things like that. I learned a lot from designing this test. There were some questions I was trying to design that I learned it would be too easy or too hard, and learned a lot that way. So, I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you all for joining me in this prequel to this strange exam that will be coming tomorrow. Make sure to watch that whole video before you consider whether or not you want to do the final exam. And the answers will be out on this channel about a week later. I'll also be back for a live stream at about this time tomorrow morning for anyone who happens to be free. And that will be right before the test drops, unless there's a chance I'll have the test ready by tonight. More likely tomorrow, in about 24 hours, the test will be coming out. So, thank you all for joining me here. Love having all the comments and all the combo lords joining. And I'll catch you